well practiced.
Pretty much he said, if you remember anything, hit record.
So
Not bad. Ooh,
oh, somebody has a chickadee on their head. I love it.
fun.
I want a chickadee on my head.
Chickadees at Three Rivers there. The chickadees at Wolf Ridge are just hopping right now. There's all over the place. Chickadee Landing is so fun to be at right now.
That is magical.
Mhm. Well, as people are joining in here now that it's 4 o'clock, you want to put your name into our chat here, where you're from. And it's December. Happy December. Up here on the North Shore, we have snow, we have ice. So what are you looking forward to in our winter here now that we're outdoor educators ready to tackle winter? Some people would say their favorite season to be teaching outside. So your name, where you're from, and what's getting you excited about winter. And I am not Joe Valesky today. I'm Emily Delphos. Joe is in a series of meetings this week, and he'll act like he's really busy, but he's actually very excited about that. That's like what's giving him life this week. He loves meeting with the naturalists, checking up on them. So I think he'll pop in here, but for those of us just joining, you want to go ahead, put in the chat your name, where you're from, and what's getting you excited about winter, teaching in the winter. I know down in the cities, there's no snow yet, but.
I know, but I'm loving, like, I have a connection with Kathy already. She's also looking forward to using snowshoes. We got to get the snow, but it looks good. We have some downhill skiers and building snow people. It sounds, I know. Oh, hot chocolate. I just had a mug. I needed a little hot chocolate. It is the season.
And I just wanted to say I have really enjoyed your programming, and especially the couple of programming that were about the new science standards. And I already started using some of them in some of our schools. And someone said, that was really a good question. I said, well, I stole the question.
That's awesome, Kathy. Good to hear. Now we have a cross-country skier. It's all, or Nordic, whichever way you want to say it, you know. So good deal.
Awesome. Let me go. Another one here, since Joe isn't here and would never say this himself, but it's going to be on the record for him. Just wanted to give a shout out to Joe and Sue and Anna for the Teach Outdoors Minnesota winning an award through the Minnesota Association for Environmental Educators from the year. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, thanks. We were blessed to get the Program of the Year award. And so we are all very excited to accept the award, but really, honestly, it is from everybody. We can't have Teach Outdoors without this great group of people that come together on Wednesdays and other times. And we're excited. We're excited to see where we keep going with it. So that's very fun. Well, today we have Laura Duffy with us, and she is an educational specialist with the Minnesota DNR. And I am going to let her introduce herself and kind of the role she has and some of the neat things the DNR have been putting together. So take it away, Laura.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. So again, I'm Laura. I work for the DNR, and some of you may know me as the Minnesota Project Learning Tree Coordinator, which I've done that program for the last 20 years or so. And I also work a great deal with the Minnesota School Forest Program, and I might just touch on that a little bit myself. So I already see some nodding heads. People kind of know what's those programs are. I think I'm just going to go right into the PowerPoint here as soon as I find it. Here we go. Do that. And I can't go down to the top here. Here we go. Slideshow from beginning. Oh, that's wrong. I gotta go all the way up to the top here. Whoop. All right, hopefully everybody's seeing the screen I'm seeing, which is the beginning screen. Thanks. So this is a PowerPoint that I originally gave at the MEA conference last month. If anybody was there, I don't think you were, but it was a pretty low attended conference for MEA. So I think still because of the pandemic. So thank you, Teach Outdoors, for letting me to do some more here. This is just a screen grab of the project page on our website. It's on the DNR website. So this is just the beginning. That's how to get a hold of me. Let me go on a little bit here. How do I make this go down? Next, there we go. I think, for heaven's sakes, here's what the PowerPoint, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do an activity and then questions if we have time. First, we have the PowerPoint, then a short little activity at the end, and then questions. And so for some of you overachievers, I just put the URL for the lessons right here on the page. If you want to go to it while I'm talking, because some people I know some people are like that. So there it is. It's on the DNR website. It's called the PLT Ojibwe Dakota Lessons. Okay. All right, again, this is me, and I'm just got to explain some of the logos here before I get into the meat of it. Project Learning Tree has been hosted by the Department of Natural Resources since 1978. So it's a program that's been around for a while, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, most teachers are familiar with it by going to workshops to get lessons, environmental education lessons. And that's the backbone of Project Learning Tree, is those teacher workshops, just like Project WET, just like Project WILD. In recent years, PLT, National Project Learning Tree, has fallen under the umbrella of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which is why that logo is on here. The SFI is, if you purchase, say, Kleenex or lumber or timber or paper, and you see the SFI logo on it, that is kind of like the good housekeeping seal of approval, so that you know that timber product was harvested sustainably, with a nod toward wildlife management and habitat and water quality and sustainability. Okay, so I'm just giving you all that in a nutshell. The Minnesota DNR manages thousands of acres of public land, and all of it, nearly all of it, is third-party certified as sustainable with SFI. So that's kind of a neat thing that the DNR does that a lot of the public doesn't know about. Here's Project Learning Tree. If you have taken PLT workshops a while ago, you might recognize that orange guide right in the middle of the screen. It's been updated recently. And if this was normal times and not a pandemic, I would be pushing out their new revised guide, which is that green one you see on the left. I'd be pushing that really hard. It's a cool guide, Explore Your Environment. On the right, you'll see a map of where the school forests are in the state. So I work with that program a lot as well. There's probably a school forest near you, unless you live in the southwestern part of the state. They're all the way up in Baudette. They're all the way as far south as the Rochester area. So there's 150 in the state right now, and some school forests are really small. Most of them are in the metro. One's like only 1/3 of an acre. The biggest school forest is 300 acres, though, way up in Pennington County, near the White Earth Reservation. So that's kind of a cool thing. All right, so before I go on, when I did this presentation for MEA, I had acknowledged when I was doing it, I was in the town of St. Paul, city of St. Paul. So we make an acknowledgement when we start. This is a picture, a painting, I think by Seth Eastman, of the town of Kaposia in St. Paul. And if you're familiar with St. Paul, you see the bluffs, and a lot of the bluffs have been cut away by railroads and the cliffs area. So we do acknowledge that we are on traditional Dakota land. All right, again, there's that URL at the bottom of the screen if you need it. But as we are, I'm going to give a lot of background information about just Indigenous knowledge that we need to know as teachers. When we started this project some years ago, we wanted to just let's get these lessons out, but not, and then as we were doing the lessons, we were realizing that a lot of teachers need a little bit of help around some basic background of Minnesota cultural history, simply because we didn't learn it in high school. We didn't learn it in school ourselves, a lot of us. And we have some apprehensions about we don't want to misappropriate cultures. We don't want to offend anybody. So we do need some basic background. So on that web page, you will also see these supplemental resources. And I'm going to go through these a little bit in this PowerPoint before we get into the actual lesson. So first thing to know is some language. And we all use different labels as we are familiar with. Generically, we call Indigenous peoples, we can call them Indigenous, Native American, American Indian, First Nations. It's okay. There's just a lot of labels for the same things, and it's just good to know. If you do know more, use that knowledge. So if you know if the tribe is from the Anishinaabe or Dakota, go ahead and say that. That's even better. And if you even know, and so the Anishinaabe is an umbrella term for several different cultures. Ojibwe is just one of them, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Historically in this state, the French settlers and fur traders that were first here referred to the Ojibwe as the Chippewa. We don't use that term so much anymore, but we do have to recognize Chippewa because it's already written in many treaties. It's in the Chippewa National Forest. The word is out there, but the preferred term is Ojibwe. Same with Dakota. You'll see the word Sioux out there, which is not a positive word to use for Dakota, but it's in the treaties. The Shakopee, Mdewakanton Sioux have that in their charter. They call themselves Sioux in that charter when they really are Dakota. So those words are there, and I'm just kind of bringing that up. And then if you know even further where the person you're speaking with is from, maybe they're from the Bois Forte Reservation of Ojibwe. Bois Forte is up by Net Lake in northern Minnesota. Bois Forte literally means strong wood. It's a French word. Or maybe they're Mdewakanton, Dakota. Mide means lake, and Wakan is spirit, and then Atan is people. So Mdewakanton, Dakota are the people who are from Spirit Lake. Spirit Lake is Mille Lacs Lake, and that's Mdewakan Lake for the Dakota. Okay, so they're a bunch of language, generic, tribal, band. The more you know, the better you are. More language. I'm an English major to start with, so language just fascinates me. Here are some words that have been familiar, that we're sort of familiar with. So those of us in the Twin Cities are probably aware of the big debate around renaming Lake Calhoun a couple of years ago from Lake Calhoun to Bidimakaska. And in Dakota language, that literally means White Earth Lake. So I'm just looking at some of these. These are all from the metro area. I'm sorry if you're not in the metro, but here are some. Mendota is the town I grew up in, and that's right at the confluence of the Minnesota and the Mississippi rivers. And the word Mendota is just a way of saying Bedote. Bedote just means confluence. There are Bedotes all up and down our rivers. So each one of those river confluences does give some, it's a place of spiritual power. And the Mendota Bedote is the place where the Dakota in that area believed that was the beginning of creation, was right there where the Minnesota River hits the Mississippi. Okay, so I'll let you look at that. The reference is at the bottom. All right, moving on forward. Raise your hand if you have any questions with that. All right, so here's a map of the Twin Cities area, again, of some of the most spiritually important places. One half of the states in our country owe their names to Native American origins. It's a half of the states in the nation. So Minnesota, some of you know, means cloudy water or sky tinted water. It means the clouds are in the water. That means clear water. Minnesota, Connecticut, Wisconsin, all these states have Native origins. And even in the Twin Cities area, Kaposia is where St. Paul is, the Hahawakpa, the Mississippi River, the Witatonka, the Pike Island. All these places are very accessible. And some of you are probably nodding your heads because you've been to several of these places. There's a lot of good interpretive signage when you do visit some of these places now. All right. This is an image of Dakota burials. And I need to spend some time on this screen. When we talk to people who are native to our lands, some of us who are non-native, like myself, I am not a tribal member. My family, my grandparents were literally born on the boat that brought them here from overseas, from Slovenia. So some of us non-native people may not understand the true connection of how you feel part of the land, as some of the indigenous peoples do. When I was at Pilot Knob not too long ago, there was a push in the city of Mendota Heights that there were going to be some condominiums built at the top of Pilot Knob. Pilot Knob is located by Pike Island down there. If you look at that map, it's a place of burial. It's all up and down our rivers in this state, and including as far north as Grand Mound up on the Rainy River. This was a home of the mound builder woodland cultures. And when the Dakota people came, they continued that tradition to bury their dead on those mounds. What you're seeing here is when someone dies, the family will put the body up on the top of a scaffold. The body is watched over closely by a relative, an honored relative, for at least 2 weeks or whatever the mourning period is, to make sure that the body is not molested by any animals or by the weather or anything like that. The body stays up on the scaffold for a period of time so that the spirit can re-enter the world, into the air, into the world. After that time is done, the body is removed from the scaffold and buried into the mound with the rest of the earth. When I was at Pilot Knob, I was speaking with, I forgot his name, a fellow who is a Dakota, Metawakan Dakota, and he was working with the city of Mendota Heights to try to stop the development of the condominiums on the top of Pilot Knob. And he would lean over and he picked up the dirt, the soil right that we were standing on, and just let it drip through his fingers and said, "You need to understand that my relatives are in this soil. Their blood and their bones are in this soil, and to put any permanent private housing on it is a desecration of the cemetery." And this was initially a problem because our laws and such say if you are going to, you do need to do archaeological digs before you make a road or build houses. And if you find a cemetery, and traditionally our non-Indian cemeteries consist of grave markers and coffins and things like that. And none of that are in mounds. So we had to figure out how to go work around those rules, adjust those rules so that we could honor these traditional sites. If you are in the Twin Cities, there are very few of our mounds left along the rivers. There used to be hundreds and hundreds of mounds. Pilot Knob was a big one because it was right at that river confluence. And it was also a very high point. I heard that back before our modern development, you could stand on Pilot Knob and in a calm day, you could hear St. Anthony Falls, which is 6 miles away. So it's really a place of power and great landscaping, great vistas up there as well. All right, so at the time of European contact in our area, about in the middle 1700s, this is where a lot of the tribes shook out, okay? The Dakota were basically in the southern part of the state, where Minnesota is now. The Ojibwe were to the north. Let's see here, I gotta go to this. Now, I mentioned before, the Ojibwe people are part of the Anishinaabe. Anishinaabe means original people. And that consists of the Ojibwe tribes, Ottawa, Sault Sioux, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Algonquin. Okay, so they were pretty much all of the Lake State areas, all the way out to New York State. Dakota means ally, and the Dakota people included the Midewiwakatan, the Wapatuanan, the Wapakute, and the Sissetawan. And I hope I didn't mess up those names too much. In the state of South Dakota, Dakota called themselves either Dakota, Nakota, or Teton. So there's a lot of different words here. In the tribes that you see on this map, a lot of them were moving around, and the Ojibwe came to the Ojibwe came to Minnesota area about 500 years ago. Dakota used to extend all the way up into northern Minnesota. But when the Ojibwe came from the east, they were getting pressure from white European settlers and being pushed further east and paddled across the Great Lakes to find the place where food grows on water. And that means they were looking for the place where it was rumored that food, AKA wild rice, grows on water. So they made it all the way over to northern Minnesota about 500 years ago. And between 500 years ago and say 150 years ago, or even 200 years ago, there was a lot of tribal interactions because the Ojibwe were pushing in on Dakota lands, and there was a lot of conflict going on, not surprisingly. So by the time of European contact, that was about the line that went through. You can see where Mille Lacs Lake is, right in the middle of the screen. And that's where Dakota were certainly as far north as that, only 200 years ago. So when you are teaching or understanding about tribal history, you need to know about treaties. You really, really need to have a basic grasp about our treaty history in the state. What I'll point out here on this map is that red line on the map on the left. And I know it's a little fuzzy, but that is the Dakota Ojibwe Treaty of 1825. As of 1825, the Dakota and the Ojibwe themselves had pretty much shuffled themselves so that the Ojibwe were in the north of that line and the Dakota were the south. Okay. And then parts of land were continually ceded over to the United States. 1851, 1837 and 1851 ceded over a big chunk of southern Minnesota to the United States, and that was all tribal land. And then in the northern part of the states, you can see all these other smaller treaties that finally ceded away lands to the United States. And those were the Ojibwe lands. If you look on the right map, and you'll see those chunks of color in the north, those are the Ojibwe reservations. So you'll see the Red Lake and the White Earth, Leech Lake, Boys Fort, Mille Lacs. Those are where all of our Ojibwe reservations are. In the south, you'll see just some words and little dots, and those are where the 5 Dakota communities are located today. There's some history behind why the Ojibwe actually have land and the Dakota do not. Here's the reason. When treaties were signed with the Ojibwe and the Dakota, as far back as 1837 or so, it was an agreement between the tribes and the US government that European settlement could happen on traditional Indian land. In return, the US government would give the tribes food, money, blankets, whatever it was, okay? In the North, but at the same time, none of those tribes ever ceded their rights to hunt, fish, or gather from the lands that they were ceding, okay? That's a big deal because some of us who were around in the 1990s may remember a lot of discussion going on in the DNR about those treaty rights that had been agreed to but taken away. So even though the Ojibwe never ceded those rights, they essentially, the US government essentially acted as if they did up until the 1990s when the tribes began to assert themselves and work through the legal process to get those rights back. The tribes in the North will tell you that, yes, it's called the White Earth Reservation, but they don't like the word reservation because it makes it sound that as if that was land given by the United States to tribes, when really it was always tribal land to begin with. So they do not like they want to have us understand that difference, that this is not land given to them, this is land that they kept. And that is a big thing to know about when teaching about Indian lands. Now in the South, the Dakota signed those same treaties with this and retained the same rights. However, their rights were rescinded after the Dakota War of 1862. And that is, some of you may know about, that war happened because a lot of the tribes were getting very upset with the US government because the government was not giving them what they thought they had coming to them, such as the food and the money and the blankets and things like that. So in 1862, several tribes that were in that area rose up and killed white settlers. About 500 white settlers were killed, along with 150 Dakota were also killed during that conflict. After that, the US government was not too happy with the Dakota and essentially stripped away that language. And so that's why the Dakota to this day, they were all banished to west to South Dakota. Some stayed behind, and you can see where they are in those communities, but they did lose their land. And only today are some of those Dakota communities in the South really working to get some of that land back, such as I know the Shakopee Metawakaton have got 4,000 acres now, when only a few years ago it was 200. So slowly but surely, maybe they'll get some of their land back as they continue to work on this. So after that Dakota uprising, going all over the place here, the US Army came in and rounded up 300 Dakota men and boys to hang. And that seemed a little excessive even to Abraham Lincoln, and he came in and reduced that number from 300 to 38. And to this day, that mass hanging of 38 men in Mankato still remains the largest mass execution in United States history. So something to not be too proud of. In northern Minnesota, this is a photograph of Chief Hole in the Day, and I'm not going to try to say his name. It's Bago Neshi, something like that. I'm sorry. And then to the left, you'll see a news clipping. This is the least racist title in news clippings I could find, honestly. So I put this one up here. What had happened in 1898, there was a conflict between the United States 3rd Infantry and the Pillager Band of Chippewa, in which the United States was trying to capture Ganesh Shig, as a result of a dispute of Indian service on the Leech Lake Reservation. So there was quite a battle up there at Leech Lake. This was the Battle of Sugar Point on Leech Lake, which is in the Battleground State Forest to this day. This was noted to be the last Indian uprising in the United States, happened here in Minnesota in 1898. Chief Hole in the Day had negotiated the formation of the White Earth Reservation and was considered a leader by the United States of the Chippewa Indians, even though a lot of the Chippewa Indians didn't consider Chief Hole in the Day as a leader. Okay. So that's just a quick overview of just some of the battles that have taken place in our great state here. So as a result of a lot of these battles, what happened was the United States government really wanted to clamp down on Indian culture in our communities. So these are children in an Indian boarding school, and you'll see a few things about the children in this picture. Long hair is a source of power and strength in the Indian community. And so when these kids were sent away, the first thing the white teachers did was cut their hair off. Children also wore moccasins or went barefoot, but here at the school, they were forced to wear hard shoes, cutting them off literally from the earth. And that was how they felt. They were forced to speak English, and were in some cases, if they spoke their native language, they would get their mouths washed out with soap, or some horrible abuses took place. I'm hoping it wasn't true at every single school, but there was some pretty atrocious behavior taken on these children to just cut them off from their Indian heritage. So not surprisingly, to this day, there's a lot of mistrust between from Indian peoples to other people today, non-Indian people today. Let's see, I'm on my page here. The Indian boarding schools were active in our state all the way up until the 1950s. So really not long ago. When I met with some tribal leaders in northern Minnesota in 2018, one of them said that his grandfather was probably in this picture. And so when a community has been traumatized like this, it takes a long time to rebuild that trust and to also regain footing as a people in this country. And that's what's happening now, especially through the academic standards as well. All right, and then I have this slide up again for some reason. So maybe it's just a little bit bigger. You can see where the communities are. So even though at point of European contract, there were millions of Indian people who lived in this area, okay, from northern Minnesota and southern Minnesota. There were a couple million Indians. And that population got reduced a lot after being banished west or forced onto reservations or being killed. Yet, if you do work with Native people, they want you to know that they are still here. And I hear this over and over again. They are still here. Great, talk about the past, but recognize that they're current. They're your friends and your neighbors. This is an aerial picture of the Minneapolis Indian Center. It's about 11 blocks away from where George Floyd was murdered. So you can, if you ever do visit this area, which is great to visit, you can also see that, you know, they are still recovering from that trauma of the past. And this place acknowledges it and helps them work together. What they would like to, so one thing, when working with these lessons, communities would like you to know that they love, respect, they are humble, they have wisdom and honesty. These are values that they teach to children today. What these children are doing in the picture is they're making kinnikinnick or chanshasa. What they're doing is taking branches of red osier dogwood, which you probably might have not too far from you, and they're scraping off that red bark. And they do this in the winter. You scrape off the red bark, you save it, but the kinnikinnick or the chanshasa that they really want to save is that green inner bark. And you save this bark and you use it as an offering for when you have to take a natural resource. It's a very meditative process to do the scraping. And I think the point of it, even if you are able to do this kind of scraping to leave an offering, is to just acknowledge that you are taking something from nature with some understanding of what you're doing. You're leaving you're showing gratitude. And I think it's similar to sometimes when I see schools when they paint little pebbles or stones and then they leave them in an area like along a trail. They're acknowledging that they're using that trail, they're using the land. And so it's the same kind of idea behind it. This is a photograph taken by the person who helped work on the lessons. Another thing when you do work with any kind of Native lesson, like the ones I'll show you later, try to invite a tribal member to your class to share the lessons with students whenever you can. I tried to get somebody today and she was not available. So like in the picture on the left, if you notice the boy on the left, he's dancing on parched rice with his sticks. You can see that this is not too old of a picture because his hair is cut short. The fellow on the right, that's Larry Smallwood, known as Amik. He helped contribute a couple stories to these lessons. He's, I think, on the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. Larissa is the wonderful woman I worked with who helped write our lessons. So just to let you all know, the lessons themselves, the body and the backbone of the lessons are PLT. They are PLT lessons you may have already used. But Larissa added tribal background and culture to it. So they're modified so that we can teach about the Dakota history and the Ojibwe history in the state. Larissa was working as a DNR naturalist near Lake Bemidji State Park and the Sudan mine, but she is also an active member of the tribes in the north. She's actually Onondaga by birth. She was born in upstate New York, but she's been living among the tribes up in northern Minnesota for about 20 years. One thing that was very important to the tribal elders that I consulted with when we started this project is that the lessons were created by one of them, by somebody who really was a tribal member and understood what to include and not to include. So you can see her on the left, she's wearing her jingle dress. She participates in a lot of the dances in the north as well. She visits Minnesota, but right now she's in northern Michigan working on her PhD in industrial heritage. So if you ever come across her, she's a really fun person to talk to. All right, so here's where the lessons are. Again, there's that same URL in case you need it one more time. And these are the lessons. So like I said, these are Project Learning Tree lessons. We renamed them. So the first one, Respecting Mother Earth, used to be called in the PLT book. That was, oh cripes, I can't remember it now. But they all have PLT. They all have PLT backbones. They're generally for grades K through 8. Most of them, I think, are for more toward upper elementary. Okay, so I just wanted to put those out there. And they're all basically science, but there's a lot of social studies sprinkled in, as well as ELA. I think, let's see, Mother Earth provides is especially a great English activity, or at least language arts activity, I should call it. 400 Acre Wood is a math activity, and the rest are science and social studies. Each level has, the typical things you see on a lesson. There's a sidebar that shows the grades, the standards, correlation, the background, a step-by-step procedure, student handouts, and assessment opportunities. So they're PLT, they were made for formal education, but certainly usable by non-formals as well. Yeah, we're all interested in all these features. They're modified for Minnesota stuff. So berries are berries. Lacrosse was a Dakota game that was played here. Our wildlife is featured. Wild rice and maple syruping. These are all part of the Dakota Ojibwe lifeways. Every season has an activity to do that, and each activity is to ensure for survival and livelihood. So hunting season in the fall, racing season in summer, fall maple in the spring, berries in the summer. And lacrosse playing and storytelling was always winter on those frozen lakes. The lessons, if you do click around and dig into them, you'll see photos. Some are original photos from Larissa. She used to teach on the Fond du Lac Reservation, as well as many other hats she used to wear. Contemporary photos from people who are living today. And disclaimer, Larry just passed away about a year ago, but I still call him contemporary. And then many historic photos from the Historical Society and other sources. So are we ready to do a lesson? I'm going to go on to a lesson unless anybody has any quick questions about some of the background I went over. I went over it kind of fast, I thought.
And so fun learning all of this. I think everybody would agree. So thank you. I mean,
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot to it. So,
no, it's deep and it's wonderful. And we now know where the website is to review it and take it in some more.
yeah. And it's a fun journey to just explore. You'll start knowing a little bit, and then as you do it more and more and learn more and more, it gets much deeper. It gets into your bones. I don't know how to explain it. I'm reading the Braiding Sweetgrass book again, and it just gets into your bones. So I'm going to do a lesson, just a brief introduction of the lesson. We're going to listen to a story. All right, it's a shorter story. We're going to listen to it. And then when we're done with the story, we're going to talk about it. And you're going to watch me. I got a little activity here to do. Okay. So I'm going on to the next slide. This is Mary Louise Defender Wilson. She has a great, you can find a bunch of her stories online. Dakota, South Dakota, but first from here. This is about the star on the cottonwood tree, and I have a couple pictures of a picture of a couple cottonwood trees. I'm going to click on the YouTube video, and I really hope you can all hear this. You might hear a commercial first, knowing YouTube. Hold on.
The anesthesiologist was like, looks like residency did a number on you.
Okay, that was the commercial. I'll start at the beginning.
A long time ago, when everything was still new, up in the sky were all these stars. Amongst them was this little star who was very interested, curious about everything. This little star traveled across the sky, would stop and examine so many things. One day, this little star came down to Earth. It traveled all around the Earth, looking at all the animals, all the birds, all the plants, just everything that was alive. One day, it came near this village. There was a sound coming from this village that was so beautiful and so wonderful. The little star could not believe it. It stayed close to this village. It had never heard anything so beautiful in all of the heavens and all of the places it went to around the earth. So it stayed close to this village. Listened and listened. It just couldn't get enough of hearing that beautiful sound. One day it got to thinking, I am a star and I'm supposed to be up there in the sky with the other stars. I had better go back. So it went back up into the sky and was with the other stars. But it began to think about this beautiful sound it had heard coming from that village. And it thought, I would like to go back and hear it some more. Then it began to get very lonesome. It began to feel very sad. So when the stars were talking about different things, the little star asked them if it could go back and live near that village so it could hear that beautiful sound. The star said, no, you are a star and you belong up here in the sky. So it didn't say anything. It tried to be involved in all the things that stars do, shining up in the sky, moving here and there. But it got so lonely. It went back to the stars again and said, I am so lonesome and I feel so bad. I want to go and stay near that village forever to hear that sound. The stars said, you cannot do that because those are people. They have things that they have to do in order to stay alive. They have work to do. They have to gather food. They have to build their houses. They have to look after their children. They have to make their clothes. And they have to live. And if you are close by there, shining around, they will all be looking at you. You will disturb their lives and they will not get along very good. So you can't do that. So the little star thought and finally then said to the other stars, if I can find a way to be close to that village without them seeing me, can I stay there? And they said, yes, if you can find a way to stay there without disturbing the people, then you can go. So it went close to that village and it looked around and it saw this tree, a cottonwood tree growing close to the village. And the star said, I will stay inside that tree where I can hear that beautiful sound that comes from that village. And that sound was the sound of the people, the women, the men, the children, laughing and saying all these good words to each other. And the star still is in that cottonwood tree, hoping to hear those beautiful sounds.
Okay. You all heard the story? Maybe you've heard it before. All right. And I love her stories. I listened to that one over and over in the past. So that's the story. And now in the lesson, this is kind of more of a ELA type of lesson. We do some comparisons. We listen to that story and we compare it to other stories that are commonly told in Minnesota. On the left, I've got Paul Bunyan and Babe. On the right, if you're in a classical school, I've got an image of Persephone and Hades. Both of these myths tell stories about how things came to be. So how did the star get in the cottonwood tree? How did the Mississippi River get formed? Paul was dragging his axe on the land. How do we have the seasons? Persephone was captured by Hades and let out for every spring to bring the spring and the summer. Okay. So here's just an example of a graphic organizer. It can be discussed outdoors or indoors. When I have played that story that Mary Louise Defender Wilson just said, I've either just played it on my phone for teachers and students, and just turn it on high. Or if I don't have a good YouTube connection, I would just retell the story. But it's so nice to hear it in her words first. And saying the story outdoors when you're under a cottonwood tree is ideal, and I've done it many times. I suppose you could do it under an aspen tree if you're up north, Emily. So how did something in nature come to be? The little star wanted to stay close to hear good sounds. And I've had kindergarten and first grade teachers use that. The tree's waiting for you to say nice things to each other all the time to reinforce that. Who are the main characters? Where did the events? So all the setting questions in the story type, and when, where, who, why, to deconstruct all that. Okay. But the fun part of it, I always think, is the science part. So I was toying with Sue, telling, hey, everybody go grab some cotton twigs before my presentation today. If you've never found the star in the cottonwood tree, this is where I usually send kids outside. I say, pick up several twigs and we'll try our best to find the star. So this is a basic twig diagram from Project Learning Tree. You can see where the buds and the leaf scale scars are, and we can go over that, the science behind all that. The science, of course, is observing and feeling and touching the twig itself. What we're going to be paying attention to here is that bud scale scar, and that's where we snap the twig. So I need to turn my camera back on. I'm just going to stop the share. You can see my face again, and I have a twig. Hold that up. I'm going to find one interesting thing about the bud scale scars is that each one is that's 1 year of growth up till the next one. That's the second year of growth, third year, fourth year, fifth year, sixth year. So this twig I have is 6 years old. And that's kind of a fun counting game, and just also looking at it. You find right where the bud scale scar is. Okay, here's where I'm going to show my age. Here we go. And I'm going to snap it right in the middle. And that's not the best star in the world, but there is a star in the middle. Okay, and you do this, and it usually takes a few tries. Kids will do it over and over until they find it. And many of you have probably done it in the past. There's another star, and that's just the star-shaped pith in the middle. Okay. So going back to the screen. Oh, down to the end. Okay. So this is what the star would look like right here. And I'm sure many of you have done that, but if you haven't, do it. It's a lot of fun. That's the star. This is a holdover slide, which I think you'll appreciate from the MEA. I put this in for the MEA conference, so most of you know this kind of stuff. But Dr. Ko did come out with this is a pretty new study that I think just came out in 2020, so it's another thing to share. It's in Children and Nature Network. What I like about this is that when students received their outdoor biology lessons outdoors, they were significantly more engaged in their next instructional period on all measures than if they received the biology lessons indoors. And this held true for different teachers, different times of day, and different times of year. And that bump in attention was large, much larger than even Dr. Ko expected, because in some cases, teachers had to redirect only half as often, and kids paid attention 1 or 2 standard deviations better. So that's a lot of better. And I just shared it with the teachers who showed up to my conference my session at the MEA conference. And come on, slide. And then this just came up the other day. I attended the MNA conference. And if anybody here listening wants to learn more about how to understand Native Minnesota, I really highly recommend going to the understandnativeminnesota.org minnesota.org site. You can sign up to be on a newsletter and get notifications on that. It's headed by the Shakopee, but it's really all Native Minnesota. So this is a really cool website to explore. I encourage you all to do that. And then that's me. And that's Bedote right by my house. So any questions at the end here? I went through it real fast and I think we're close to the end.
We have about 5-6 minutes. So, I mean, really anyone who would like to ask Laura a question or give a comment. Laura, I love that you even just had the audio of Mary Louise Defender Wilson and reminding us just how powerful an auditory story is. I know when I was doing something with birch bark, I was able to find an Ojibwe elder telling the story behind the legend of the birch bark markings with the thunderbirds that are on it. And the credibility, because I'm a white woman, is just, the kids just thought it was awesome.
Mhm. Leanne?
I have a question. You mentioned that the curriculum is based for kindergarten through maybe 8, but where youth now are in those grades 9 to 12, maybe they haven't had cultural education like this, or cultural heritage education like this. Where are they getting their instruction to understand the Indigenous background and the current issues for Indigenous peoples?
I honestly don't know exactly. I know this is evolving. The Department of Education, John, I know you're here, you can pipe in. I think the Indigenous standards were added in 2018 with other grades, not just science. And since then, teachers have been scrambling to find those lessons that you're talking about from all grades. I have yet to see like a clearinghouse of lessons. The MDE website is where I would start. There is an Office of Indian Education to start looking for other lessons like that. But I think everything's a work in progress.
Absolutely, everything's always a work in progress. And I was just scrolling through your 2019 Native authored book collection that is on your Minnesota DNR website.
Mhm.
And I oftentimes, even though I'm a science nerd, having book collections, and I'm noticing this list goes all the way to K-12, book collections in your classroom, remembering to read aloud from multicultural perspectives. It's amazing. You start touching, I'm thinking of a first grade standards about materials, Minnesota materials, and how they've been used through history and time. And it's like, wow, if you start reading these stories, I bet you start seeing some of these materials being used, and the kids will make those connections. So sometimes we're going to have to be creative, I think, and use all sorts of different avenues to get to the cultural portions of our standards.
If anybody wants a freebie for their classroom, go to the Great Lakes, it's called GLFWIC, Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and they have some free stuff like Indian comic books and a really good poster on treaties that just came out, and then some other posters for your wall that are really cool and informative. GLFWIC.
Yep, I'll get that in the chat. That's
put that in there.
awesome. Yes, I've had those before too. So yep, getting it in the chat right now.
Good. Yeah, any other questions?
These are just great resources. I mean, not only the website, but what you're giving us too. I'm trying to get to understand Native American, Native Minnesota better too.
Yeah. The other cool thing for people who are in the Twin Cities, the Bryn Mawr Elementary School in the Bryn Mawr neighborhood in Minneapolis, they have a school forest right next to their school, and anybody can go into the school forest. They have a nice nature trail. They've been working with some Dakota speakers in that area, because that school happens to be across the street from Birch Bark Books, which is Louise Erdrich's bookstore. And they have translated a lot of the plants on that trail into Dakota. So you can walk down that trail and see the Dakota words for Jack in the Pulpit or Cottonwood or whatever it is. It's really cool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
The Minwacaton community, Prior Lake and Shakopee area, they built a beautiful new facility, and it has an amazing resource library, and it's open to the public at different times. Now with COVID restrictions and stuff, you would want to touch base with that, but I was able to go in, and it's an amazing resource in that area too, and might make some friends and
Yeah,
get a great conversation going.
absolutely. Any other great
Well-
lessons, or? I'm just wondering if anybody's been using any lessons that they really like with their students.
Yeah,
Touch on culture.
braiding sweetgrass, people say yes. Oh yeah,
Right here.
yeah. One of my favorite lessons was engineering with birch bark, and I kind of funneled it towards the 5th grade standards. And so we would learn a little bit about birch bark and its amazing qualities. And then I would get some birch bark, I would harvest some, and so they could see it and its pliability. And they had to figure out, I gave them pieces of just paper, 2 brass brads, because that would be a peg, and a length of yarn, because that would, and we talked about what sinew would be. And could you engineer a basket with this length? And so they had to figure out how to cut it and such. And they got to play with that. And then they were able to, I found a YouTube video of Native people actually making the baskets, and then they tried their hand at it again. So it was just really fun. There's a lot of ideas out there. Just play with them, see what's in your own backyard. We just happened to be at a school that had a lot of dead birch, and so we were able to do some of those things. So that was neat.
Very cool. I wrote that down.
Oh, there you go.
I see David put in the chat a link from the Minneapolis Nature Preschools, a plant walk.
Oh, that's what
Is
I
that the
was
Bryn
talking
Mawr?
about. Sorry, that's at the Bryn
Thank you,
Mawr.
David.
Thanks, Dave. Perfect.
Cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So maybe Wolf Ridge will do something similar.
Ooh.
Neat.
Okay.
Anyone else questions for Laura?
Or ideas that to share with us that you've done?
Cool.
Or is it just dinner time?
It could be. It is 5 o'clock. Say, folks, next week we are taking a virtual field trip, and we're going to Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and we're going to learn how the naturalists and the teachers there are working together to take their kids outside. So again, how do they do it? What are their resources? What are their tips and tricks? We're going to learn from the people in the field actually taking their kids outside on a regular basis. And so if you want to hear some of the tips and tricks, please join us next Wednesday.
And those sessions have been awesome to hear from the people that are out there doing things. So you have colleagues and whatnot that are really interested in, getting their kids outdoors. How logistically do we make this happen? Would highly recommend these kinds of sessions, because it's really cool to hear from these people.
And I almost forgot the CEU link. I just threw it in there. Sorry, friends, it's down at the bottom. There you go. Other than that, Emily and I will stay here for a few minutes, and we'll wish you well. And we hope to see you real soon.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. I'm going to go too. Bye-bye.
All right.